My mother walked into my business 19 years after giving me away and demanded $18,000. She did not apologize. She did not ask whether I had survived. She looked across the counter at the life I had built without her and said, "You owe us for letting you live." That was the moment I finally understood something I should have learned when I was 6 years old. Some people do not return because they love you. They return because they believe your success belongs to them. Hello. My name is Julian Rahman. I am 25 years old, and I own 2 phone repair shops and a small wholesale electronics business in Jersey City, New Jersey. Most customers know me as the calm man behind the counter, the one who explains every repair, never overcharges, and remembers which elderly customers need help setting up their passwords. They do not know that I spent my first 6 years being treated like a mistake. My parents, Salma and Ferris, already had 2 daughters when I was born. Ela was the oldest. Nora came 2 years after her. My mother had built our entire household around raising girls. Clothes moved from Ela to Nora. Shoes, jackets, school bags, toys, everything followed the same path. Then I arrived a boy. Instead of changing the system, my mother forced me into it. Some of my earliest memories are of standing beside the front door while she pushed glittering clips into my hair. "I don't want them," I would whisper. "You don't get to waste money because you're embarrassed," she would answer. I wore my sister's pink sneakers, ruffled jackets, and princess backpacks. My lunchbox had Nora's name scratched out and mine written underneath in black marker. At school, the other children noticed immediately. They called me by my sister's name. They pulled the clips from my hair. They blocked the boys' restroom and told me I did not belong there. Teachers saw enough to understand what was happening, but most of them turned away. At home, I received no comfort. My father buried himself in delivery schedules and television. My mother called me dramatic. Nora repeated the insults at dinner because she liked watching me shrink. Ella sometimes laughed with her, not because she hated me, but because joining the cruelty was safer than becoming its next target. By the time I was 6, I had stopped asking adults to protect me. Then came the afternoon that ended my place in that family. 3 older children cornered me, near the playground fence. One ripped a clip from my hair and held it above me. Another emptied my backpack into the dirt. The third kicked gravel across my books. A teacher stood close enough to hear me crying. She looked at us. Then she walked into the school building. I gathered my things alone and walked home with scraped palms, one untied shoe, and a jacket stained with dirt. My mother was arranging family photographs on the coffee table. In the center was a framed portrait. Ferris and Salma sat together. Ala and Nora smiled between them. I stood at the far edge, almost cropped out. Half my shoulder was missing from the picture. Everyone else looked like a family. I looked like someone who had accidentally wandered into the frame. My mother looked at my dirty clothes. Nothing. Then stopped standing there looking pathetic. Something inside me became very quiet. I picked up the frame. My father looked up from the table. "Put that down." I stared at the happy faces inside it. Then I dropped it. The glass shattered across the floor. A crack cut through the photograph between me and the rest of them. Nora screamed. Ela started crying. My father stood but did not move toward me. My mother remained calm. That frightened me more than shouting would have. She looked at the broken frame, then at me. "We're done," she said. She made me clean every piece of glass while she watched from the sofa. 2 days later, my father told me to pack a bag. There was no family discussion, no counseling, no promise that anything would improve. A couple named Rihanna and Dev had agreed to take me. They ran a tailoring kiosk with a small T window attached. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and had spent years trying to adopt a child, but the process was expensive and slow. My father knew Dev through delivery work. He presented me to them like an object he no longer needed. I heard my parents talking in the hallway that night. "They're poorer than us," my mother said. "He probably won't finish school. At least he'll be out of here," my father replied. From the bedroom, Nora asked, "Can I have his space?" "Yes," my mother said immediately. They began dividing my room before I had even left. The next morning, Ferris drove me across the city without speaking. He left me at Rena and Dev's apartment with one bag, a damaged lunchbox, and a thin blanket. Rena looked at the clips in my hair and the clothes that did not belong to me. She did not laugh. She did not ask why I looked like that. She placed an empty donation bag on the bed and crouched in front of me. "Do you want this clip?" she asked. "No." "Then we take it out." She removed it carefully so it would not pull my hair. Dev opened the blue curtain covering the small window, and sunlight entered the room. Blue was my favorite color. No one in my first home had ever asked. Rena dropped the glittering clip into the donation bag. "Fresh start," she said. I did not believe her at first. Trauma teaches a child to wait for kindness to expire. I expected Rena and Dev to become angry after a week, maybe two. I expected locked doors, skipped meals, and cold silence. Instead, they stayed kind. When I broke a plate, Dev handed me a broom and said, "Accidents happen." That was all. No punishment, no accusation. No reminder that I was expensive or unwanted. That night, I cried for the first time since leaving my biological parents. Not because I was afraid, because I finally felt safe. Rena and Dev worked long hours, but they made room for me in every part of their life. At 8, I helped organize supplies at the tailoring kiosk. At 10, I counted change, tracked small expenses, and handled customer pickups. Rena taught me costs and margins. Dev taught me how to negotiate without insulting people. Business is not about taking the most money. He once told me, it is about giving people a reason to return. That lesson became the foundation of everything I built later. In high school, I discovered I was good at accounting, economics, and systems. I liked finding the weak point in a process and repairing it. After graduation, I told Rena and Dev I would work at the kiosk full-time so they could rest. Rena looked at me, as if I had suggested setting the building on fire. "You are going to college," she said. "We cannot afford that. We have been saving. You already gave me everything." She shook her head. "We are giving you one more thing. A future without limits." They had saved for years. No vacations. No expensive clothes. Dev took repair jobs after closing. Rena worked extra shifts. I studied business and operations at a local college. During weekends, I returned to the kiosk and learned what classrooms could not teach. On graduation day, Rena and Dev sat in the front row wearing their best clothes. They invited Ferris and Salma. Neither came. I told myself I did not care. But some part of me still searched the back of the room. After the ceremony, Dev handed me an envelope containing $17,000. I tried to give it back. He closed my fingers around it. "Build something," he said. I opened a small phone repair kiosk in a busy shopping area. I repaired screens, replaced batteries, cleaned charging ports, and sold basic accessories. For the first year, I worked from opening until closing. Then a supplier sent me 40 defective screens. I installed 15 before customers started returning. Every refund came out of my pocket. For 3 nights, I stared at numbers that refused to balance. I was one bad week away from shutting down. Dev found me at 2 in the morning with a calculator in one hand and cold coffee in the other. "You going to quit?" he asked. "I'm thinking about it." "Don't." That was all he said. So I stayed. I documented every defective unit, contacted the supplier, threatened a small claims case, and negotiated until I recovered enough money to survive. Then I rebuilt customer trust, one repair at a time. When a phone was not worth fixing, I said so. When I made a mistake, I corrected it. People remembered honesty. Within 18 months, I repaid Rena and Dev. Then I opened a second location. I hired a college student named Mike, who became my first manager. I added wholesale cases, chargers, and cables. The profit on each item was small, but the volume was steady. By 24, I had 2 repair shops, 6 employees, and a growing wholesale line. It was not a giant company, but it was stable, it was honest, and it was mine. Then one afternoon, I looked up from a cracked screen and saw my biological father standing inside my shop. 19 years had passed since he left me at Rena and Dev's apartment. His hair was gray, but he still carried himself as though every room belonged to him. He smiled and opened his arms. Customers were watching, so I allowed the hug. It felt like embracing a stranger. He stepped back and looked around. "This is incredible," he said. "We always knew you were smart." "We." That word almost made me laugh. He spoke loudly about how proud he was. He described my business as though my success proved he had raised me well. Then he said, "Your mother will want to see this place. I'll bring her this weekend." He did not ask. He assumed 19 years could be erased because I now owned something valuable. That night, I told Rena and Dev what had happened. Rena said forgiveness might help me release the past. Dev remained quiet until she finished. Then he looked at me. "They do not get to return because you are doing well," he said. "If you meet them, you set the rules." I agreed to one meeting. Rena and Dev would be there. My biological parents arrived at their apartment that Saturday. I had imagined the reunion many times. In my imagination, my mother apologized. My father admitted he had failed me. They asked about the years they missed. Instead, Salma sat at the table and smiled. "You should thank us," she said. "We've found you wonderful parents. Look how successful you became." I stared at her. She wanted credit for abandoning me, because the people who took me in had loved me. "I am grateful for Rena and Dev," I said. That was the only gratitude I offered. They asked about revenue, customers, expansion, and how much the shops were worth. They did not ask whether I had been frightened after they gave me away. They did not ask whether I had missed them. They did not ask what it felt like to be 6 years old and unwanted. An hour later, they left. The next afternoon, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. It was Salma. She did not ask how I was. She said, "We need $18,000. According to her, Nora's daughter had been accepted into a certification program. Tuition was covered, but there were fees and an urgent private loan. "Send me the invoice," I said. "I will pay the institution directly." Silence. Then her voice hardened. "You don't trust your own mother. I trust paperwork." She ended the call. 3 days passed. No invoice arrived. Instead, Ela contacted me and asked to meet at a cafe. For 10 minutes, she pretended the meeting was about reconnecting. Then she said, "Mom told me you might help with the certification." I leaned back. "I'm still waiting for documents." Family should help family. Family usually stays longer than 6 years before asking for money. She laughed nervously. Then she made a mistake. "Mom told me not to mention the money right away." Her face changed as soon as the words left her mouth. The meeting had been arranged. She was not there to reconnect. She had been sent to soften me. I stood and placed cash beside my coffee. "You would not be here if Salma had not sent you." "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that." I walked away while she called my name. 2 days later, Nora called. She did not pretend to care about me. "So you're really going to leave your niece without help?" "What is the name of the program?" "A career training center." "Which one?" "I don't remember." "Send the invoice." "What if we make it 5,000 instead?" That was when I knew the truth. The story could change. Only the demand for cash remained the same. I began saving every message and recording every detail. Dates, times, phone numbers, exact wording. Dev had taught me that documentation matters when dishonest people begin rewriting history. Then Nora entered my main shop, took selfies, and posted online about supporting her brother's business. She had ignored me for 19 years, but now she wanted the public to believe she had always been part of my success. At the counter, she asked for a family discount. My employee charged the normal price. "You're charging your own sister," she said loudly. I stepped out from the back room. Everyone pays the same. Even family. Especially people who use that word only when they want something. She left the products on the counter and walked out. 3 days later, my mother arrived. She chose the busiest hour of the afternoon. Customers stood in line. Every repair station was occupied. Salma placed one hand against her chest and raised her voice. "My own son refuses to help his family after we gave him life." The room went quiet. She had chosen the shop because she thought public shame would control me. I kept my voice calm. "Leave, or security will escort you out. You would call security on your own mother." I hired them for situations exactly like this. Her face tightened. She leaned toward me and lowered her voice. "You owe us. We could have made a different choice, and we didn't." I felt the old fear rise in my chest. Anymore. I signaled to Mike. He called security. Before leaving, Salma pointed at me. "This is not over." She was right. That evening, Ferris went to Rena and Dev's tailoring kiosk and accused them of stealing me. 2 days later, a supplier called. "Someone says you're going bankrupt and might not pay your invoices." The caller had identified himself as an older relative. I contacted my other suppliers. 2 had received the same warning. Then an anonymous complaint triggered a city inspection. My paperwork was clean, but the disruption cost time and money. A second false complaint targeted my other location. The pattern was obvious. My biological family was trying to damage my business until paying them became easier than resisting. That was their mistake. They believed pressure would turn me back into the child who cleaned broken glass while his mother watched. Instead, pressure turned me into the businessman Dev had trained me to become. I installed cameras. I hired an attorney. She sent cease and desist letters and formal no trespass notices. My employees received one instruction: anyone claiming to be related to me would be treated exactly like any other person causing a disturbance. 3 days after the letters arrived, my phone filled with messages. Nora wrote, "You got a lawyer." Seriously. Allah wrote, "This is extreme." Salma wrote, "After everything we have done for you." I blocked them. 2 weeks later, Ferris and Salma entered my main shop together. Again, they chose a busy Saturday. Ferris smiled at the customers like a proud father visiting his son's business. "We need to talk," he said. "You need to leave. We are your parents. We deserve respect. You disappeared for 19 years. Salma snapped. "You act like we abandoned you on a street corner. We found you a home." I looked at her. "What else did you arrange?" My father's face changed. "This is not the place," he said quickly. I kept my eyes on Salma. "What did you schedule before I was born?" Her breathing became heavy. Then anger pushed the truth out of her. "When we learned you were a boy, we scheduled an appointment to end the pregnancy," she said. "We did not go through with it. You should be grateful." The shop became completely silent. A technician froze with a screwdriver in his hand. A customer lowered the phone case she had been examining. Even Ferris looked shocked that Salma had said it aloud. "She doesn't mean it that way," he said. "You meant it enough to schedule it," I answered. "Then you punished me for surviving." I turned to security. "Call the police. They are trespassing." Salma began shouting. Ferris tried to explain. Officers arrived and escorted them out in front of everyone. After the door closed, I apologized to the customers. An older man near the counter looked at me and said quietly, "You did the right thing." That sentence helped more than he knew. 3 days later, Isla contacted me again. This time, she asked to meet alone and said she had evidence. I nearly ignored her, but something in her message felt different. We met at a cafe near my apartment. She arrived carrying a manila folder. Inside were elementary school pickup records. Beside Illa's and Nora's names were regular signatures. Beside mine, the same note appeared again and again. Not picked up. There were more than a dozen entries. Under the records was a kindergarten photograph of me, in glittering clips, and a feminine jacket. My mother was laughing in the background. My father was looking away. The documents did not prove that I had imagined my childhood correctly. They proved I had remembered it correctly. I looked at Ela. "Why are you giving me this?" Her voice cracked. "Because I need to get out." After her marriage ended, she had moved back in with Ferris and Salma. They controlled her money, checked her phone, and monitored where she went. She showed me a message thread. Salma and Nora had been instructing her to manipulate me. They believe she was still cooperating. "They think I'm their messenger," Isla said. "I'm not." I searched her face for another lie. Then I asked, "What is the worst thing Salma has said about me?" Ela answered without hesitation. She said it would have been easier if you had never survived infancy. She said you owed your life to her because she did not keep the appointment. The words hurt, but they also ended the last question inside me. My mother had not spoken in anger at the shop. She had revealed what she truly believed. I called a business contact at an accounting firm and arranged an interview for Ela. Then I gave her instructions. New bank account. Private email. Paperless statements. Save enough for rent and a security deposit. "This is one chance," I told her. "I will help you become independent. That does not make us a close family overnight." "I understand. If you give them information about me, I understand that too." At the door, she stopped. "I am sorry," she said, "for all of it. I did not forgive her that day, but I did not close the door either." Ela got the job. 6 weeks later, she moved into a small studio while Ferris and Salma were away. She left a 3-line note. "I am out. Do not contact me. We are done." Salma appeared at Ela's workplace twice. Security removed her both times. After the second incident, Ela obtained a restraining order. Then Nora launched a public attack against me. She posted in local groups that I was a successful businessman who had abandoned his loving family. She tagged my stores and encouraged people to question my character. I could have responded with anger. Instead, I responded with evidence. I posted the cease and desist letter, the police report, the school pickup records, screenshots of the money demands, and the cropped family photograph. I explained the timeline. My parents gave me away at 6. They returned 19 years later after discovering my success. They demanded undocumented cash. When I refused, they targeted my suppliers and filed false complaints against my businesses. I did not insult them. I simply told the truth. The community response was immediate. Customers shared their own stories about controlling families. Nora's posts were removed. People came into my shops to support me. Sales increased that month. Ferris filed a defamation complaint. My attorney answered with documents, recordings, and witness statements. The complaint was dismissed. The court allowed us to recover legal expenses, leaving Ferris and Salma responsible for thousands of dollars in fees. That Christmas, they planned an ambush at Reena and Dev's apartment. They believed they could force a public reconciliation in front of neighbors. Ela warned me. Reena, Dev, Ela, and I had dinner at Ela's small apartment. Reena cooked. Dev talked about retiring. Ela described her new job. No one raised their voice. No one demanded money. No one watched the door in fear. It was the family dinner I had imagined as a child. Around 7, my phone began vibrating. "Where are you? We are waiting." "This is disrespectful." I answered Ferris once. I know about the ambush. I am spending Christmas with people who care about me. Lose my number. Then I blocked every new number. Consequences continued reaching them. Ferris lost a major delivery client after the public disturbances and trespassing case. Salma lost her retail job after customers recognized her from a recording of the confrontation. Nora's online sales business collapsed when people found the documents I had posted. I did not celebrate. Their losses did not return my childhood. Justice did not mean I woke up one morning completely healed. For months, unknown phone numbers made my stomach drop. I checked my locks repeatedly. When customers raised their voices, my hands sometimes shook. Dev eventually said, "You survived them. Now you have to learn how to live without expecting them to return." He was right. I started speaking with a therapist. I learned that success does not erase the nervous system of a frightened child. I learned that boundaries are not cruelty. I learned that refusing abuse is not revenge. A year after Ferris first entered my shop, I opened a third location. Ela earned a promotion and moved into an apartment of her own. We remained careful with each other, but the relationship slowly became real, because neither of us demanded instant forgiveness. Rena and Dev finally reduced their hours at the tailoring kiosk. On the day my third shop opened, I placed one photograph behind the counter. It was not the old family portrait. It showed Rena, Dev, Ela, my employees, and me standing beneath the new store sign. No one was cropped out. No one stood at the edge. That evening, after the last customer left, I looked at the picture for a long time. My biological parents had treated me like a burden because I was born a boy. They gave me away. They ignored 19 years of my life. Then they returned and tried to charge me for surviving them. But they misunderstood the debt. I owed them nothing. The love that raised me came from Rihanna and Dev. The discipline that built my business came from the lessons they taught me. The courage that protected it came from the child. I once was the boy who finally learned that no adult was coming to rescue him and later became the man who could rescue himself. My parents thought giving me away had removed me from their family picture. They were right, but what they never understood was that I did not need a place in their frame. I built my own. And in mine, love is never used as a bill. Family is never used as a threat. And nobody has to earn the right to exist. They gave me away because they believed I was the wrong child. 19 years later, they returned and discovered the truth. I was not the child they should have erased. I was the life they were never worthy enough to keep.